Good to go?
Good to go.
Terrific. Hello, MECLA. Welcome to today's community event, the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. I love this opening screenshot that hopefully you can see, just showing all of our people around the country, around the Zoom, and all participating in this fantastic collaborative alliance. Welcome to today's event. Thank you for your time. Today's going to be terrific, a run through of where we've been, where we're going, and a chance to talk directly with some of the chairs of our working groups and to hear what else other people have been doing. If you're in one part of MECLA, let's hear what others have got to say and also hear MECLA in a broader context. So welcome. Okay. First of all, I'd like to recognise that I'm joining you from Gadigal country in the Eora Nation, otherwise known as Sydney. We're all on Indigenous land around the country, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. An important acknowledgement. Thank you. Okay. Now, MECLA, as you know, operates in a pre-competition environment. That's really important that our governance mechanism is recognised. We do that because, as this diagram shows, we are operating across an ecosystem that needs to collaborate if we're going to reduce embodied carbon. No matter how willing, no one of us can do it on our own. No one party can do it on their own, and has to do it with collaboration. And of course, collaboration can at times be anti-competitive. For us, not at all. We won't have any of that. But if you look along the construction project life cycle, the top dark boxes on this diagram, hopefully this is familiar to you if you're a regular on MECLA events. And if it's new, have a look and also jump on our website to take a closer look, because we really have tried to map out how does it work? What are the stages? Who are the parties? How does finance flow? How do materials flow? What are the enablers? What are the barriers? Who are the influences and what are the pressure points? This has helped us map out where we need to get involved, where we need to act, and to build momentum to reduce embodied carbon. Today there's a lot of evidence that we're a do tank. I'm often saying we're a do tank. Well, you'll see exactly what we mean by that. Really want us to come away feeling that, yep, the momentum is now, I'd like to think unstoppable, but it is certainly building. And we are lifting capability. Uplift is the management buzzword, but capability uplift is something we've been doing for 4 years now. There is more to do, and we've got the resources and the platform to contribute to that. So let's keep going. A big shout out to our 190 plus members and participants now. It's absolutely fantastic. Hopefully you'll recognise your logo on this slide, but also logos, maybe organisations you didn't know were involved, didn't know were interested or acting on embodied carbon. It's just fantastic to see across that last slide with the ecosystem, there are brand logos here that represent every step of the way. And that's just fantastic. To our funding partners from New South Wales Government, South Australian Government, to WWF and Climate Kick, also a big thank you. My company Precinct as well. And yeah, to see research organisations, to see contractors, material suppliers, government entities, professional bodies, consultancies, all in there making this collaboration happen. Thank you very much. All right, let's have a look back at 2024. Those numbers show the number of organisations participating, participants from around the states. New South Wales, ACT, Queensland, Victoria, South Australia and WA. I think we'll have to send a mission down to Tasmania and up to the Northern Territory, but it's a pretty good spread. So I mentioned 190 plus partner organisations. Our website and engagement, 3,000 plus website views per month. That's a terrific testament to that, well, this is an idea whose time has come. People want to learn more and draw on our resources. LinkedIn got more followers than maybe Beyonce, who knows? And our subscribers to the newsletter, it gets read, it doesn't just get sent out. People are reading it, which is also a fantastic way of sharing the information. Our feedback submissions, you might wonder what's that about. Well, this is an acronym soup. ASBEC, Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, we've contributed to their major policy work. Neighbours, National Australian Built Energy Rating Scheme, also contributed to their embodied carbon tool. GBCA, Green Building Council of Australia, with regular submissions and to and fro of contributions there. The Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development at a Commonwealth level. The APCC, Australasian Procurement and Construction Council, we've contributed to their Green Construction Guide. To the Queensland Olympics, we've been contributing to that. And then to the federal DECU, Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. So really pleased to see that we're a valued stakeholder for those bodies and we're able to contribute. We've held 23 public events. We've launched 12 publications. We'll come to those shortly, and they are all freely available in our resource library. So to you, your colleagues and contacts, let's share those materials. And yes, 14 presentations within the working groups with over 4,000 views. So that's our reach. That's the Do Tank doing its work. If you look at the timeline of the last 12 months, you'll see just the spread of events. It's busy. That's why our secretariat really is flat out, whether that's putting in submissions to different, the bodies I mentioned, our Nutcracker, our deep dives, our conference attendance down in Melbourne for the decarbonising building industry, and all of our events. It really is a terrific spread, and I guess that's why we get to December and feel a little bit out of breath. I'll dive into a few of these as we go on, but yeah, it was a busy year. We have another one coming up. Our low carbon specification guides are a fantastic addition to knowledge sharing in the sector. Low carbon aluminium specification guide is a great case in point. If you haven't seen this, if it's relevant to you, have a look. It's prepared by a multidisciplinary team from different stages through the value chain. It's evidence-based and it's eminently practical. And it's only 5 pages long. So you're not having to digest a PhD thesis. This is very practical advice, so that if anyone in your organisation or project says, oh, how do we use that? Okay, have a look at this. It's that type of practical information. And I'm delighted to say we've also produced equivalent specification guides for concrete tiles and masonry, plastic pipes, for clay bricks and roof tiles, and for low carbon aluminium. So a lot of very practical guides to help inform decision making for designers, for procurement, for engineers, for project managers. Well worth a look. One of our MECLA subgroups did a lot of work preparing an industry readiness survey, and I'm delighted that we partnered with Infrastructure New South Wales to roll that out. They led the rollout, but Anne Austin and her subgroup put a lot of thought into what do we need to ask, who do we need to ask, and let's gauge the readiness of the construction and infrastructure sectors to deliver on reduced emissions in construction. Key messages there are pretty interesting. 1/3 of government and 1/5 of industry see low confidence in their readiness to deliver, to manage low carbon. Of course, if you're a glass half full person and flip that around, that's 2/3 of government and 4/5, so 80% of industry have a somewhat to very high level of confidence, which is fantastic. Room for further capability uplift, and we have a role to play in that. But I took great heart when I saw those numbers. Interestingly, some of the barriers were access to training materials, time to do it, and senior executive buy-in. I'd like to think the approachability of our materials and the fact that CPD points are available for some of our key events, key spotlights, will help with that capability uplift. And boy, if if any execs in your industry need to be convinced or need to see what's going on, I'll point them our way. But thank you very much to Infrastructure New South Wales for rolling this out, and to the subgroup who did the thinking behind this. Another one of our initiatives is this embodied carbon reduction pledge policy. Again, on the demand side of things, one of the subgroups pulling together what would it look like if contractors had to pledge publicly that their organisation was on a decarb pathway in order to be eligible to tender for government capital works. And so the concept was fleshed out and developed, and delighted to say that Department of Infrastructure and Transport in South Australia has taken that on and applied it as a prerequisite for their tenderers over a certain procurement threshold. So fantastic. Would be great if other jurisdictions also took that on, but happy to say that it's begun, and it's another point of impact. Our nutcracker sessions. Now, this is something that could be applied to all sorts of challenges, particularly around our challenge of embodied carbon. This was really targeted. We were looking at industrial warehouses and how do we get that ecosystem, that subsector, to be comfortable working with low emission cement, particularly in the massive slabs that are mission critical to the success of building an industrial shed. The photo at the bottom there on the right shows one whiteboard per stage of the project lifecycle. Above that are representatives from each of those stages. So we had heads of sustainability, we had general managers, we had procurement managers, but we also had blokes who are normally in gumboots and normally laying or placing cement. And anecdotally, I heard several times, gee, that's the first time I've spoken to someone who actually does that. The knowledge sharing, practical, personal interconnection that happens when everybody's in the room. We went for 3 hours. I won't say everybody was locked in and not allowed to leave until we'd reached an agreement, but we came together, and by the time those 60, 70 people were ready to leave after 3 hours, there was a really good shared understanding of what's in the way, how do we get around it, and how do we get to be able to cut emissions by 40% to meet a Green Star 6-star target. That was a real success. I'd like to see the Nutcracker model rolled out for other challenges. Something that's coming up and has leveraged off work that MECLA produced was, you might remember, one of our working group 3-4 spent a lot of time working on the guide. The guide was there to be, if I do this, if I've got this role in a particular stage of the project lifecycle, how can I target embodied carbon? What can I do about it? Now, that was a massive task. A lot of output came from that group, and we've actually handed over that material to the Monoro project. Now, Monoro is headed up by Grimshaw Architects, an international practice in partnership with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And as you can see from the image, the screen grab there, stages of project lifecycle, and then tasks on what can be done. The live website, let's put that in the chat. The live website, click on that box, click on a box and see what can be done at that point by that discipline. It's a fantastic resource. It'll be international. That'll be launched later this month, but I'm delighted that the work that we were contributing to has been passed on and now gone to a greater, I suppose, a greater platform. Really fantastic to see that work being leveraged. Deep dives. Now, deep dives is a nice way of saying site visits, really. 3 images there. There are a lot of us in hard hats and high vis at BlueScope Steel's Port Kembla Works. In the middle there, InfraBuild. That was hot. I came out of there very hot under the collar. InfraBuild at Blacktown, where they've got their electric arc recycling facility. And then the one on the right is the Exlam Tumbarumba plant. That tour also took in the Hine Timber Mill as well. So not just theoretically sitting around with others talking process, talking technical, actually getting dirty boots or high vis and going see where processes are undertaken to see how building materials are made. I think that's such an important step in understanding the magnitude, the challenge, the complexity, and seeing where stuff's done, particularly for the construction industry. A lot of us, we're far removed from the building site or from the manufacturing site. Great to get out of the office. Okay, let's look forward to 2025. As you know, we've got our working group structures, the doing of the do tank. These working groups will continue. Working group 1, demand side. Working group 2, the measurement and evaluation. 3, 4, they've handed on the guide work, but we'll see what their role is going forward. The material working groups on the supply side: steel, concrete and cement, aluminium, construction materials and assemblies. We'll be hearing from them shortly. Building services and engineered timber. And then finally, a year in the MECLA fold is the residential builders group. And that's cumulatively, obviously, a big carbon ticket, but individually can slip through the cracks. So it's great to have residential building there as well. I've mentioned the Secretariat a couple of times. Who are we? Well, that's some bloke on the left there. That's me. Monica Richter from WWF. This is really Monica's brainchild, let's be honest. It was Monica who said, I think embodied carbon is going to need some focus. Let's have a go. So thank you to Monica. I know you're online today. And Kati and Alexi from Climate Kick really keep our Secretariat going. They're both online and we'll be hearing from Kati very shortly. But a big thank you to you and to Climate Kick, to WWF for keeping us going. Funding. Last year, so that's about a third government funding and 2/3 industry funding. We are funded by you, our members, and government and research bodies through material and in-kind, not to overlook in-kind at all. It's fantastic. We've held off moving to a pay-to-play model. We really don't want to exclude anybody from the capability uplift that we're driving, and that's what we've set up to do. However, we really do encourage organisations to pay. If you can, please do. It's very hard running MECLA without just the funds to pay for the personnel, to do the convening, to manage the participation, manage the events, to keep us moving. So if you can, if there's budget, if you've got a manager or a leader you can lean on, please lean, because yeah, it's very hard running MECLA on a shoestring, and we've got a lot to do. We've got an ambitious program coming up. All right, looking forward. Kati, how about I run the slides and ask you to do the talking now? How does that sound?
That sounds fantastic, Hudson. Thank you.
All right, Kati Bahayan, I'll hand over to you and I'll turn off my camera.
All right. So deliverables for 2025. We still have a lot to go. Let's dive in. Next slide. So public events, Hudson has mentioned, we run spotlight events, we run our briefings, we have our deep dives, and we are keen to continue doing that for 2025. Publications, there's a range of those. A lot of the state of play policy report that Hudson mentioned that we will launch at the event on the 17th of March when we announced the materials from MECLA flowing into the Minoro guide, that Alexi will be presenting the state of play policy report. Other working groups have been updating material specification guides. There will also be a few new ones, and there's exciting things to come there. There are fact sheets coming and further case studies. Again, we'll continue with the presentations from the working groups, and we will continue to look at our working groups. Are they still required, or do we maybe need new ones as well? So there's a continuous updating, and one of the working groups that is, or subgroups that is starting their work now is the Property and Infrastructure Investors subgroup. Feedback submissions continue. Hudson mentioned there were many last year. There continue to be some this year, and we'll be kicking off having presentations from the Infrastructure New South Wales on the readiness, impact, neighbours, and ASPEC will be coming up very soon, and there will be others. And the website, we strive to keep that always up to date. All the materials are available for free, including all the links to the recordings, and we will continue to update you through LinkedIn and our newsletters. And then other things that we are looking at, one of those being those Nutcracker events. We're really hoping to get organise a Nutcracker event with New South Wales EPA this year, looking at the difficulties that a lot of the organisations we are working with have when it comes to getting approvals for pilots to work with recycled materials. And having seen the success of the Nutcracker event we had this year, we are really hopeful to get a large group of people from industry and government together to look at these problems and work on those together. And another thing I want to mention before I hand back to Hudson is our scope, diversification and extension of the scope. We're always looking at what other things might be important happening in the space that is adjacent to construction and building industry that we might be looking at, such as nature positivity and biodiversity, that we have been looking at in the past and will continue to do so. Thank you, Hudson.
Thanks, Cardi. That was great. I think circularity also comes to mind in terms of just diversification. I know we have that in our founding mandate. Our mission is to look at embodied carbon, but with an eye to circularity. Interestingly, the spotlights that Cardi mentioned, two come to mind from last year, and I guess this is a good example of why your input is important, because several of the design-minded people in MECLA said, hey, we've got to look at design as well. It's not just about materials. And so we ran a spotlight on design to look at, well, how do you design out the carbon rather than just swap materials? Is that an alternative structure? Is it an alternative technique? And I think design clearly has a big role to play. Another one we had towards the end of the year was around mandatory reporting. That's a contextual change for all of us. The earlier point about executive buy-in and executive time to look at embodied carbon, I think when boards start to carry out their fiduciary responsibilities around mandatory reporting, signing off on reports, executives will have to know, okay, what are our scope 3 emissions? What are our supply chain emissions? And that's where that'll be another driver for change. The session we held on that really did dive into it. Have a look at our recorded resources on the resource page, because I think that's a very handy one. Okay. If I could ask the chairs who are standing by to pop their cameras on. And your mics. G'day, Evan. Hi, Kathy.
Hey.
Hi, Hudson.
Joe, g'day. Rachel, Julia, Jeff.
Hello.
Any faces. Hello, everyone. How are you going?
Very good.
Good, good. Hey, let me kick the ball off. Jeff, aluminium is sometimes called congealed electricity. If that electricity comes from coal-fired sources, that's a pretty carbon-intense material, but that's not necessarily the case. How do you see 2025 playing out from an aluminium point of view and for your working group?
It's a good question, Hudson. There's been a lot happening over the past couple of years, and in particularly just towards the second half of last year, where a number of our largest smelters up and down the eastern seaboard have been out for expressions of interest, and some more advanced than that, looking to build or go out to contract for very large renewable energy solutions. So not just the power supply itself, but also the firming solutions to help those plants. So one is then the Gladstone region up near Boyne for Rio Tinto. And then also here in New South Wales, the Tomago smelter is out to market looking for similar sort of proposals. I think the other thing, just picking up on circularity that you were talking about just before, I'm really pleased to say that our working group members, Capral, have initiated another trial with Rio Tinto, which came off very successfully towards the end of last year, I think November, where they started testing basically a closed loop system where the billet that was not used, or the aluminium that was not used from the factory, was sent straight to the smelter and input into a new mix of aluminium. So I think up to about 20 to 30% recycled aluminium content was tested. And off the back of that, I think they're looking to see how that can scale. So yeah, lots of good stuff happening in this space.
Gosh, they're practical steps. That's very exciting. Thanks, Jeff. Kathy Inglis, if I could ask you, actually, before I do, to our audience, if you've got questions for our working group chairs, or for me, or the Secretariat, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. So while the audience is thinking up their curly questions, actually, don't be too curly, but put your questions in the Q&A. In the meantime, Kathy, we've got an event coming up with your group and the EPA around materials and innovation and current regulations that might stand in the way of some innovation. To me, that's one of the reasons we're here, is to engage in a respectful, collaborative way with government. Can you talk to us about that? I think people would be really interested to hear what that's all about.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have the date for that confirmed fairly soon with the EPA. But for manufacturers, particularly in New South Wales, there's a real issue with being able to use resources that are someone else's waste. The manufacturers call it a resource, it's an ingredient, but because it's someone else's waste product, there's issues around licenses, because you have a manufacturing license, not a waste license, and all the conditions around that. There are lots of repurposed products within each manufacturing plants are used, but to bring in other products can be really problematic with the EPA, and can take many years to do desktop surveys. Lots of money in consultants. Can take years before you get approval to add something that's fairly benign into a product that will make no difference to the product's performance at the end. Lab trials get done, but to get it actually approved to put in a plant takes a long time. So we really want to engage with the EPA to be able to help them to eliminate waste going to landfill that can go back into building products. And some of those products will reduce carbon, others will just reduce use of virgin materials, but it gives us all a longer life for all these things to repurpose. But if we want to remove that blockage of licensing and what's permitted, so we want to have this event, a nutcracker with the EPA and their senior staff, to be able to work through the steps and how we can facilitate manufacturers being able to do it easier.
Well, that sounds like a very common sense approach. I'm looking forward to that. I think having that constructive engagement with the regulator, who, in fairness, have had rules in place for a long time for good reason, but the context has changed, and now we need the regulations to change to reflect that. So
they have, and they are in place for a good reason. And we want to, all the manufacturers want to abide by the rules and keep their licenses, but there's things we can do better, and we just need to work together to work out a way to do it.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Evan, you guys are kind of rock stars with your low carbon concrete guide that councils have picked up. I know the ACT government has picked up. I think one of the Victorian infrastructure agencies has picked up as well. How are you going to top that in 2025? What's next, mate?
Yeah, thanks for that, Hudson. And yeah, great presentation as well. I think that's really impressive, all the things that MECLA's been up to in the last year across the supply chain. So yeah, we're always looking to kind of build upon it. Recognize it kind of wasn't perfect, but also we wanted to kind of start somewhere. That I think perfection is the enemy of good. So I think that's been really great, kind of getting that out, starting the conversation as well. The data that we had available was like the best available data we got for EC3. So they've actually been mining EPD data as API, and we're able to use that to start benchmarking for the first time, like, well, what's the lowest carbon concrete in Australia? And now
Yep.
we've been getting better data. So Neighbours then released their EPD data as well. So I guess zooming out the problem for everyone, like you got to open up these individual PDFs, look at the number, kind of transcribe it to kind of go, well, what's the lowest? So a lot of work to be done in that. So Neighbours did some of that work as well and kind of went through that. So we got their hands on their data set as well. And then Arup actually built upon that as well. And there was actually some more data that went into that as well. So I think we're up to about 4,000 like EPD data points now for EPD. So we're now crunching the numbers for that, looking to update the figure and the data sets as well. So I think that'll be really the first time it's seen in Australia. And then we're looking to kind of go further and also break that down for states as well. And we're also, so a lot of work in that space. I think that would be pretty exciting as well. Like I hadn't seen the numbers myself. Like I don't have time to open up 4,000 different EPDs and database them as well. So I only just kind of see some of these numbers as well. So it'd be great to kind of get it out there. And the aim is to really like drive awareness and competition. Like where are we at? What is the best? I want to kind of buy it. And if you're not the best, I'd put the pressure on to kind of reduce your numbers as well. So that's really exciting. And then
that 4,000, those 4,000 data points, is that saying 4,000 different types and mixes of different concretes in the market?
4,000 different EPD mixed designs covered by EPD in Australia and New Zealand now.
Wow.
I think probably even slightly higher, 4,200, I think. So mass adoption by the market. So I guess to get those numbers out, start using those numbers to drive low carbon purchasing decisions, and then to kind of go the next level again as well. We got further plans to kind of then go into and break it down per application. So you mentioned before, like warehouses or say precast concrete or for buildings. So everyone's aware of like what's the lowest for each of those different applications.
There is a bit of a phenomenon that the engineers and the project managers in any particular sector will start any conversation with a generalist saying, but what you don't understand is my application is different. So to have that, I was talking to a water pipeline project a couple of months ago, and I referenced something from transport, and they're like, transport's nothing like water. I was thinking, you might be using concrete and steel in your project. It's something transferable. So, but of those 4,000, that's fantastic. I'm sure there'll be something suitable for almost any application.
Yeah, a lot of applications covered by the data set, and they're increasing all the time. But I think with that resolution, definitely I hear that as well. Like we need to get down to that resolution of different applications as well. So a bit of work was like the industry groups to like look at defining possible applications and standardizing EPDs across the industry to include that information and digital data sets. So I think pretty exciting. Like if we can crack it in Australia, like no one else has. I kind of reached out to the UK and the US, like, have you guys are doing EPDs, but have you thought about classifying by applications, and can we copy that off you as well? They're like, we haven't kind of got to that yet. So it could be a world first. We're kind of pushing as the prize as well to try and help like look at it, get to that answer of like, but I'm different. Okay, well here's the numbers for you're different. Here's it for pipes and here's it for buildings as well. So
that's fantastic. I imagine there'll be a lot of interest in that. Hey, and a good segue over to the building group. I saw on LinkedIn the last week or so, Tom Petty, very active member of the residential builders group, and I think he pops his head into your group from time to time, posting that he was at his local building suppliers company, an equivalent to Bunnings. And so for those who haven't met Tom, he's an architect builder who's also set up a business to track carbon as it comes onto a building site. And there he was loading up his ute with low carbon concrete at no extra price, easily available at a large building supplies company. His next post was, there he was on the building site saying, well, I've just been using it and the brickie didn't even notice the difference. I've built this wall and this patio and it didn't cost anything. It's cut by carbon and it's a no-brainer. Now, I know that's a simple example of, one brickie, not transferable to complex infrastructure and high stress prefab concrete, but the message that it is publicly available, there is no green premium, basic use, doesn't have any challenges. I think shows that we are getting close to mainstreaming, if not we're there with mainstreamed availability. Terrific segue to Julia, who is co-chair of the Residential Builders Group. G'day, Julia. What do you see coming for your working group this year? Or you're on mute. Quick, hit the button. Try again. Oh, still on mute.
Is it working?
It is.
Yes.
Go.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've identified that the residential sector has one of the largest share of construction work in Australia, but there is very little frameworks or regulation to capture embodied carbon, especially for detached home or townhomes. So we were really keen to do a push with the industry to raise awareness around it and try to integrate with basics and numbers to have some framework set up for residential. The big thing coming up is going to be a bit later in the year. GBCA is going to publish a study on the impact of upfront carbon emission from residential homes in Australia, looking at the different states and how it can be reduced and how it can inform policy decisions. And a lot of the people from the working group have been involved in providing feedback on the study. So we are really excited for this to be released. And we're waiting for a confirmed date, but it should be first half of this year.
Fantastic. Thanks, Julia. I pop into those meetings when I can, and I know it's a terrific group, and unlike the other sectors, it's very, very fragmented with a lot of very small businesses doing the building of the bulk of homes. So to influence the group is quite a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the builders were identified as a key group to, support and provide more information on what can be done. And that's, where Tom Petty was as well really active, and his group, they have developed some guidelines on, what is the EPD, how to read it, what is low carbon concrete, that can be, accessible to anyone, and they're all very short. So yeah, if you want a 101 low carbon concrete or EPD reading, you can check these documents as well.
Right. All right. Thanks, Julia. Fantastic. Ali Kashani, the co-chair of the Concrete Working Group, has joined us. Ali, g'day. Thank you for joining. Evan's already maybe stolen some of your thunder by outlining what's coming for your working group, but stay there and keep listening, and pop your hand up if you've got something to say or a question. I'd like to turn to Rachel Stewart now, who's co-chair of Working Group 2, all around measurement. Now, the temptation is to boil the ocean and to solve every data and measurement challenge. How are you refining your group's task to make it doable? What are you up to?
Hi, Hudson, and thanks for the presentation so far. So yeah, as you say, we don't want to be boiling in the ocean, and what we found is as well, we don't want to repeat and duplicate work that's already been done. So there is a large piece of what we're doing is trying to, build on the work that was already done with this working group, with the upfront carbon discussion paper, and then try and understand what are the government levers, what are the demand sources, where things come from, what are the required capabilities, what do people need, and really understanding that data problem, because like you said, there's so many sources, there's so many different places where levers are getting pulled, whether it be, say, Transport for New South Wales and what they're building out and their guidelines to new regulations around climate reporting, to there's quite a lot of change that's been going on that macro level. And so yeah, trying to understand and pull all that together at the moment, and the group's just sort of really focusing on various different objectives, whether that be the kind of training, what training is required compared to what benchmarking data is out there. And I can just talk from my own experience. So many organizations are pulling so much data together at the moment, and there must be so much repeat of effort going on across this industry. And so, yeah, trying to see what's already there just in that alone and how quickly it's all changing is quite a big task, it's turned out. But yeah, it's a really interesting bunch of people that are in that working group that are collaborating on that. So yeah, we're still shaping a little bit what we think that output needs to be because of the nature of all the things I've just said. So we'll have more clarity soon on exactly what we think that deliverable needs to be. At the moment, we're still gathering.
Sure. Understand, and it is complex and balancing the big need versus what's doable and prioritizing. That takes time. But look, thank you for taking a leadership role in that. Really appreciate it. And like all of this, if there are questions or assistance needed from other members of MECLA, please, as always, reach out. But thank you. Really looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thanks, Hudson.
Josephine, I haven't spoken to you yet. Welcome from the Hunter Valley. Good to have you on the call. Now, I know you're working with Kathy on the assemblies. What's your take on 2025? What do you see? Not just the discussion with the EPA, but what else have you got in store?
Well, we're building further on some of those specification documents. So for the different material groups. So our group is materials and assemblies, and our group's been producing these really great documents that are designed to help people or organizations who are selecting materials, a bit like what Evan was saying, how to make that decision about which is going to be the best for sustainability. So our little specification guides include more than just carbon. So we're realizing that, carbon is a part of a bigger environmental situation that we're in. So we have a glass one coming up, and we're also looking to do a plasterboard and insulation coming. Any others? I think, Kathy, remind me. So I see that happening. That's what we'll be bringing.
Let's make sure that our residential builders know about that, because obviously plasterboard is ubiquitous on a resi building site, whether or for a fit out. So that's quite something. Julia, I know you're there being shy, being modest and turning off your camera. But if you could turn it on, I'm keen to ask a couple of questions have come in about the residential builders section. Rick Walters, another regular stalwart of MECLA and major contributor, has asked, have any of the bulk home builders, any of the volume builders come on board in the membership of that subgroup?
Good question. So we had a few coming in at the beginning, and I remember, Hudson, we had a few discussions with them as we were setting up the working group. They are, a few of them that are active members, but I think at the moment we have quite a good diversity between property developer in the residential space that are also builders. We also have members of builders associations.
MBA,
Yeah, MBA that are part of the team. We do have some architects, builders, consultants.
We've also got Prefab Oz, the peak body for prefabricated manufactured housing, and I have to say I think that's a very exciting development as well, from a carbon and material efficiency and an affordability point of view. That prefabricated housing has a lot to offer, I think. Another question coming your way, putting you on the spot like all of us in a Q&A session, asking whether the team will also be looking at data from retrofitting of existing homes. Has retrofitting crossed the radar?
I think there was quite a bit focus on educating in the first place, but we do find that given the size of the challenge, retrofitting has a big role to play. But yeah, thanks for raising it as a critical issue, and I would be more than happy to raise it to the group. We're just in the process of reviewing our targets and what we want to achieve this year, so we can absolutely look at this as well.
Okay, fantastic. Evan, I know I can see in the chat quite a bit of to and fro with Lauren Howe, who has been a significant contributor also in the past to Working Group 2, but a materials engineer from Arup. Do you want to talk to that out loud rather than have people reading through the chat?
Okay, yeah, I think I mentioned it in the thing before. So I guess, yeah, that data that we were looking for. So I mean, yeah, neighbors had it. I think Arup been doing a lot of work in this space as well, and actually had a graduate like kind of look at kind of building that out, because there was some additional data on top of the neighbors one as well. So yeah, I guess a big shout out to Toby, that like opened up all those ones and went through diligently as well. And then yeah, we had a couple of calls also with Arup, and they actually kind of agreed to like share that data as well with the working groups. That was like amazing. We were just like kids at Christmas at the start of the year when we got our hands on it. So we're all been kind of like busily kind of working away and crunching on that as well, because yeah, we're excited about it, because we know the industry has kind of moved so much since that initial data set that we had, and the neighbors one as well. There's more and more kind of coming out as well. So yeah, and I guess like on that, I mean, hopefully we won't be opening up PDF documents forever and a day as well. So yeah, there's more and more software as well. I think I saw a chat as well for the Australian Low Carbon Construction Materials Hub as well. So that's using API and kind of pulling these out as well. So I guess the aim is to kind of get this data like easily, so people can kind of do the analysis and run the filters for what they want as well. But we're just in a little bit of a teething period where we're kind of going to digital, and then also what information goes through and automated as well. But hopefully in the future there'll be EPD International and all the data's in there. You just download yourself. It'll fit into building construction tools and tender tools. And
I can just imagine being that poor graduate kind of, welcome to your work life. Here are 4,500 EPDs. Before lunch, could you just get through them all, please? He would definitely be praying
exactly.
for AI.
I think I'd love that, because I love like task orientated kind of things that just grunt work. But yeah, I was chatting to the grads at work. They were like, "Oh, that poor guy."
Yeah, I hope they're still there and they got a bonus. Hey, Ali, we've heard from Evans from Wholesome, one of the suppliers, Lauren, who's active on the chat and had her colleague do that analysis. From Arup, they're a professional services and engineering company. You're in the concrete group, but from a research and an academic point of view, how do you see 2025 from the concrete working group? What's the researcher's perspective?
Thank you so much, Hudson. Sorry, I need to jump off the call. I just had an urgent call. Yeah, I think that there is lots of things. One of the things that we also discuss is like, and there is lots of discussion about using the AI and machine learnings and things like that, and how it can help us in order to, like, as mentioned, even like looking at, thousands of the PDFs and things like that. And I think that there are some good things happening as well in this space that can help us, like both in terms of the EPD data itself, but also in terms of the research, mix design optimizations, decarbonizations, and those kind of things. I think that would be the key area to further deep into and see, like, what can offer us.
Okay, great. Hey, look, if you've got to duck off, thank you for your time and thank you for your ongoing work with MECLA. Really appreciate that, Ali. Brilliant. Now, I saw Anne Austin pop up and then vanish, but if you are there, Anne, I'd really love you to... Oh, there you are. G'day. Hello.
I'm just answering questions about construction.
Oh, you're on. Okay, so now a couple of the highlights that I summarised from last year: the readiness index, background work, the work on the public pledge. They're both kind of come under your demand side working group. How do you see 2025 from the demand side of things?
Yeah, we're at an interesting point in the demand group. So the focus of this working group is to specifically look at trying to raise the the actual ask for low embodied carbon or no embodied carbon materials. So we're not trying to solve the solution. We're just at least trying to get the request out there on the table. And you mentioned, with the pledge that only so far, there's been limited take up. But what did happen was in the conversations we had with multiple agencies around the country, the conversation about embodied carbon became a normal one, and one that was in the vernacular of lots of different government agencies, which it hadn't been before. So that group actually closed down. And so what we're finding that we don't have to do our subgroups, forever, that they can play a role and they can close down. And so we've got a couple that are in, so Pledge has sort of closed down one of our subgroups that's been looking at deviation and how is it possible to seamlessly and efficiently deviate from sometimes overly restrictive specifications. That group's at a bit of a nexus as to whether or not they want to continue, whereas others are emerging. So you mentioned the group that's looking at targeting in the investors and the finance side. So that group is in its very early stage, and so this FY26 probably will be their year of being clear about what their interventions will be to support investors. And we've got some great ideas there about maybe collaborating with some other industry groups that already have investors as their target market, maybe holding hands with them. So we're hopefully Rick Walters can spin some magic for us there and get those guys excited to work with us, because we don't need duplication, we just need alignment. And so if we've got multiple industry groups all moving towards the same thing together, it'll be a lot more efficient. The other thing that we're really keen to do is to find a way to repeat the Readiness Index survey. You mentioned, and you'd pulled up some of the data from that. So we did that first run with Infrastructure New South Wales, which New South Wales now are going to use to help inform the educational materials that they're going to provide. And they're going to launch a toolkit actually in April, early April. There'll be a spotlight about that. So I'm going to look out for that one. We'll talk to the findings of the survey and their toolkit. But they're unlikely to probably do the survey that regularly, because their need was to try and understand what should be in the toolkit, and they've kind of ticked that box. So we're trying to work out, okay, maybe if we ran the survey every 2 years, we'd start to see a trend in one direction or another to help us understand, are we moving the dial? Are we becoming more ready? Are we seeing any differences regionally in a metropolitan sense? And so we'd really like to repeat the survey, and we've got about 15 months to find a way to fund it. So our focus will be on trying to package this as something that maybe somebody could sponsor, or there might be some other sources of funding that could enable that survey to be repeated, so that agencies and those who are specifying low carbon can get a sense of whether or not they're ahead of the market, or the market can respond to them. So that's what's hot on our agenda. Oh,
very hot. Hey, the one with the investors I find fascinating, because it is such a big lever, the money, money talks. And I presented earlier, at some stage last year, to the investor group on climate change. And the person who introduced me described MECLA as a bottom-up entity. And I tried not to take offense. I tried to reframe us as having a whole of systems approach, rather than. But I realised from the audience point of view, the finance is in many ways the top of the food chain, because if it doesn't get funding, it doesn't get built. And so where they put their money does have a huge influence. And in my mind, I'm really keen to see the combination of enlightened self-interest from finance and the regulatory mechanism of mandatory disclosures starting to influence, okay, well, how does money get spent on projects, and therefore on carbon accounting, therefore on material selection and design. So be really...
Yeah, it's one of the things that's probably we've all imagined, I think, the sector as a line, as a linear thing of, you know, either government or an investor is setting a brief and asking for a requirement, and then, you know, contractor responds and then supplier responds, etc. And I think one of the things I really like about MECLA is that we have broken that model and realized that it's that sort the linear thinking is blocking us from you know, from the likes of Evan and the various work streams that you've heard from, that where there's people in the supply side of things really pushing boundaries and with great and, you know, innovations that they could put on the table. But if we continue to think that it's you know, top down sort of driven, we don't get any of that coming up. So maybe we are bottom up in the sense that we've got the whole system in the room, and that's one of the things that I sort of say is that MECLA has the entire value chain is working together on this, and I firmly believe that's the only way it'll move forward.
We are of one mind there. Thanks, Anne. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing how that working group comes together. Now, Monica has posed a question for us in the chat, commenting on the Productivity Commission report recently with insights into a lack of productivity in the residential building sector, poor performance in innovation. Julia, I know you're not the spokesperson for the entire residential industry all on your own, but I think we do have a role to play in fostering and broadcasting innovation. I mentioned the prefab component, but yeah, the choice of materials, the footprint and end of life, what can be recycled, what can't. How can the building working group help stimulate innovation?
Thank you. That's a big question.
A big one.
There were a lot of discussions around housing. Another one is that, you know, Australia has the largest houses in the world, and that obviously, you know, there is also a lot of efficiencies that can be achieved by reducing the size of the home or how much people occupy in space. I think in terms of innovation, we can, you know, definitely advise on put together some materials on, you know, opportunities for reduction. But what is critical is more the system thinking around, you know, how you build less in the first place, how you reduce your materials, and then, yeah, looking at efficiencies for construction. We would be, you know, more than happy to organize events and discuss the opportunities that exists in terms of efficiency of construction and good practices as well that have been incorporated. And we are looking for great case studies on low carbon homes. So if this is coming up, we would be more than happy to you know, share it with a wider group. We have published a few already, but you know, we're always looking for new ones, and it's a really good way of teasing out new ideas and show what is possible. And especially, you know, if we have more from on the prefabrication space, we would be really happy to highlight. I think we had discussion as well. We had people that were interested in providing case study in prefabrication, so there might be a few coming up soon. But yeah, it's exactly the kind of thing that, you know, we would be really willing to share to highlight the value of you know, not just reducing carbon, but also reducing cost and improving the efficiency in the residential construction market.
Terrific. Thanks, Julia. And you know, I'm tongue-in-cheek saying that you're representing the entire industry, but it is great to be able to bring those things into the questions being tackled by the working group. There's a great question in the chat about interiors and the fact that, you know, so much of our work is on the shell, and yet interiors get changed over, particularly in office or in retail, ripped out, replaced, new materials, new fit out. This falls across a couple of working groups. I'm thinking Kathy and Josephine from you know, I know you've got a plasterboards fact sheet coming out, but also Jeff, as an architect, not with an aluminium hat on, but with an architect's hat on, how do we tackle this churn of materials in fit outs, which is often for fashion reasons rather than for functional reasons? What can MECLA do there?
Well, that's a really good point. I guess with my architect hat on, but like we are, you know, despite the kind of commercial office slowdown at the moment, our workplace commercial team is probably as busy as it's ever been. So a lot of people are moving at the moment. But I am happy to say that we are receiving a lot more briefs and a lot more, I guess, receptivity, positive reception to, you know, going to clients and saying, you know, this is actually in really good condition. Can we keep that furniture? If not, can this furniture be donated? Or what are the options for it? It is happening, I would say, nearly on every conversation. It's not just being driven by us, it is coming from the clients, and they are becoming more and more aware of the impact of, you know, this sort of 7-year annual churn and what that means to their own businesses and footprints. So yeah, that is certainly good. Yeah.
I noticed I was a guest at the Green Building Council's head office at Barangaroo in Sydney last year, and it was pointed out that their interior is a fit out as a service. So they don't own it, they didn't pay for it, but they essentially rent it. I think that's the servicization of the circularity, or the which struck me as, you know, really obvious. Why wouldn't you do that? But clearly that's at the innovative end of the early adopters. Are there other comments? Josephine, I imagine that's something that occurs to you from time to time, and you're nodding away. How would you respond to the question?
I agree with Jeff. It's really a cultural thing in a way. So, you know, why do we need to keep changing our office? So increasingly people are becoming more interested in adaptive reuse, for example. And looking at what you have around you and appreciating those bits and pieces that can be kept and tell part of the story from before. Like, not everything has to be new all the time, but that culture does get assisted when architects, for example, question that. Why do you need that? Or why do you need that so big? Or you know, so that's definitely a cultural practice. And I think the other thing is to facilitate that to happen. So if the client wants to reuse something or find some reused furniture, how do they do that? And we're just sort of really starting to grow with bits and pieces of how to do it, but I think it's still quite tricky if you're looking to find that material or you're looking to move that material to the next place. That's where we kind of have a bit of blockages at, but it's improving, but it's something that needs work.
I know there's also a my consultancy Precinct is a B Corp, and one of the other B Corps that I've met is a interior design and fit out company specializing in circularity. So using and reusing, repurposing materials and furniture and appliances and equipment specifically to stop that churn going straight to landfill, and to changing the culture around using design, but changing the culture, which is such a big part of it. What else do you see coming this year, team, as leaders of the working groups? Are there any macro trends? We know the mandatory reporting is hopefully going to stay and is going to be a driver from the top of organizations, but what else is on the radar?
Yeah, Hudson, like on that, like I think the mandatory reporting, I think, will be a big driver. I think when companies that might be already looking at their scope 1 and 2 emissions and kind of look at their scope 3 emissions and then look at the impact of it in relation to it, they might see that's quite larger. And then also, I guess, like the mandatory disclosure of like the carbon reduction plans and roadmaps as well for companies, I guess, of like and how they're going to go about their targets as well. So I think we'll see an increased focus on the embodied carbon as the impact of an organization. Like a ton of carbon is the ton of carbon saved as well. So if your embodied carbon, your scope 3 emissions like 10 times larger, you should probably focus maybe on your scope 3 emissions as well, and your decarbonization plan. So better procurement processes might be part of like those plans as well. So I think we might see a greater uptick, I guess, as well, where more companies are kind of forced to do that. It's like the mandatory compliance requirements coming up. There's a lot of companies already doing that, leading, but I think it's also the legislation should drive a lot from the bottom end as well.
On that, can I ask you, MECLA is penetrating particularly the tier 1 levels, the bigger construction companies, the bigger suppliers, the bigger engineering consultants and architects and so on. It is a very tiered segment or industry. How do we best reach tiers 2 and 3, do you think?
Yeah, tricky question. I think the whole thing is complex supply chain, I guess, and that's what we're having these conversations. Like even tier 1s, they use tier 2 contractors to purchase head concrete, and they make the decision potentially about what they do, and then the data of it as well, like whether the tier 1s kind of know what concrete they get because they're outsourcing and contractually doing that. And the same with governments, like how can governments kind of drive it when they kind of don't know what they're kind of using as well. So I think jumping up and down the supply chain and having that increase transparency, I think as well, like with the reporting, like there'll be like, you can potentially use financial data if you scope freezing, have emission factors on that as well, but then that doesn't really kind of give you much insights into what the actual opportunities are for decarbonisation. And it's like you spent $1 million on this, and this is what your estimated emissions are as well. So I think it's really about like jumping down the supply chain. We've seen some organisations set, science-based targets, go down, understand what their impacts are of their products out, what are the levers that they can kind of pull, and then I guess bringing that through in procurement processes and specifications. Like we know this is a big impact for our project, our organisation, and then setting these targets that can kind of then cascade through as well, and then monitoring that as well. So I think that's a holy grail. Yeah, it's a complex beast.
And Rachel, you're putting your hand up, and I think Anne waved a hand too. So I'll go Rachel and then Anne. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see the sort of leadership from Transport for New South Wales, NSW, on requiring a certified carbon management framework. So in PAS 2080, it talks about influencing the supply chain. So I think that that, as what I see in the UK, where those levers have been in for longer, and it's pushing the market in a certain direction. And obviously, if you've actually got get certified and you've got to prove that you are doing these things in the market, I'm going to be really interested to see as that comes in for 2026 what impact that has on our industry.
Okay, interesting insights. Thanks, Rachel. Anne Austin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's just two things to reflect on your question about what do we see coming, and then it's connected to your question you then asked about tier 2s and 3s, because I think tier 2 and 3 have been able to let tier 1 lead, and that's appropriate. But that door and era is closing because ASRS, the Sustainable Reporting Standard, will require people to reach out to their supply chain who happen to be the tier 2s and 3s. And so I think even if you're not captured in those early stages of mandatory reporting yourself, if your customer is, you're captured as well, because they'll be needing to reach out to you. So I think we're seeing, I'm hopeful we're starting to see this be more normal rather than something that's just an obsession of the few. And I'm interested in the political space that we find ourselves in, and I've put on my LinkedIn, I'm doing a roundtable tomorrow at the Net Zero conference on woke and the whole kind of anti-woke movement and etc. And I think it's going to look, there'll be things that we're upset about with that anti-woke movement, but I'm also interested in whether it pushes us away from spin and hollow virtual signaling, potentially to something far more authentic and pragmatic that's got much clearer business value. And I think that I'm pondering this myself, but I think that's the gift in the in unusual wrapping. Of asking us to go, well, actually, like, let's just get real, and rather than the the song and dance that when you scratch the surface may not have much behind it. Let's really actually genuinely try and focus on a few things that really matter and see if we can make a difference. So that's, I'm curious to see if that's what comes of this sort of pendulum, that's swinging at the moment. And I hope that that's where it goes. And I actually think it's beholden on us to kind of push it there, to say, right, our response is going to be not to stop, but to be deeply real and very pragmatic in how we go about
I've got to say, Anne, I think I hear what you're saying, and I know you're not just putting lipstick on a pig there, but or a clown, but I would say that the graduate who looked through 4,500 EPDs was not virtue signaling. I think he was definitely looking at the evidence to come up with, validated conclusions. So I'm happy to say that MECLA isn't about virtue signaling, and I know you're not saying that we are, but everything we do, every working group is evidence-based, and that we've got a working group that argues over how to measure the evidence. That's how important it is. So yeah, I think we can rightly be proud of our corner in that, and absolutely not get swept up in that, because this is business case based, it is data based, and it's addressing a massive challenge, which is, would have to be the most studied phenomenon in human history, being climate change. So
that's why I think it's going to ride this test, right? Because it's real.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe some of the jumping on the bandwagon the side of things will slip away, and we'll be able to focus on the real things.
Absolutely. Agree. I'll point out, Evan and Ali, about the comment in the Q&A about what councils can do and council infrastructure assets. There is a subgroup that with councils. So to the autonomous attendee who's popped that question in there, or Ali, Evan, you're responding, that's great. But yes, work is afoot on answering both components of that, I think. So that's great.
Yeah, that falls under Working Group 1 as well. So they've been quite active in teaching councils, who are all at massively different stages in the journey.
Yes, yeah, and that reflects the size of the councils, the funding of the councils, the level of sophistication. But impact-wise, cumulatively, they use a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, a lot of embodied carbon. So a very important
and set the agenda for domestic housing.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that as well. I think there's one in the Hunter Valley as well. I know the New South Wales government has a program like looking at with council as well. I'm seeing ones in other states as well, like looking at that and how they can kind of look at decarbonising. Probably for that, I'm keen to find out and connecting with that person. While you mentioned like the mixed designs, I guess one of the things that we've been kind of advocating and talking about is moving from mixed designs this is a mix and it's low carbon, because more and more increasingly materials have differing impacts depending where you get your cement from, where it's imported or locally manufactured, how far is it transported, what admixtures, how much you use in total as well. So the only real way to kind of do that is EPDs, and that's why we're focusing on it so much, because they're publicly available, they're third party verified, they're designed to be comparable as well. So that has the total embodied carbon, so you get a like for like comparison as well. So I guess that's the work that we're trying to be doing, is people educate, what is EPDs, how to read for it. And that's why I guess we've been focusing so much on that guide, I guess, to try and translate out, hey, councils use normal class concrete. Here's the statistics and the data for it as well, to help them move to embodied carbon. I think that's really the holy grail that we've been aiming for, move people away from percentage SCMs. It's how they did it in the past, and it can be gamed. It's not a true reduction, doesn't drive the supply chain up beyond us to decarbonise, and moving through to EPDs as well. So whoever it is, shoot me a LinkedIn chat. I'm happy to kind of connect more.
Terrific. Yes, and I point point that an anonymous attendee towards the subgroup that you mentioned, Anne, on the demand side of things. So please do get in touch, whoever that anonymous person is. Hey, look, I'm conscious we're getting to the end of the day, and you've all contributed a lot to this discussion. Questions are slowing down, so why don't we wrap up? We haven't we don't keep meeting for the sake of it. I'm always saying that when we have a meeting, it's purpose driven. Look, thank you to the attendees who've taken time to hear what we've been doing and what we're planning to do. Thank you to you chairs, working group chairs and subgroup chairs who are here, who make things happen, who corral the actions, the activity and the diaries of your working groups. I'm really proud of what this group has, what MECLA has contributed to, I keep using the term capability uplift, but this is industry change, it's whole systems change, and all of the different levers that we're part of, that we're helping inform and drive change. It's just fantastic. So thanks for laying out what we're going to be doing this year. Please get in touch with the Secretariat if you need support. It's wonderful that you're doing your work. Thank you so much. Thank you to Monica, to Kati and Alexi behind the scenes with the Secretariat. It's great working with you, and to all of us, let's keep going. There are challenges this year, but I think Embodied Carbon, we have got some real momentum going that trickle down to the tier 2 and tier 3. And you put that very eloquently, that it's, they're the customers or the suppliers, so they're part of the value chain. They will be captured. Where there's resistance, we've got some mythbusters, we've got case studies to show where things have happened, what's been done, how it was done, what's been learned. Let's keep going. Really appreciate your time for now, but let's call it there. Thank you, everybody. I really look forward. There's the Net Zero Summit, Construction Summit. May see some of you there tomorrow here in Sydney. Looking forward to that. And the 17th of March for the Monoro launch. Looking forward to that as well. Keep an eye on the newsletter, on the LinkedIn feed, and see you again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.